Having recently relocated to rural England, I found myself struggling to acclimate to the tranquil yet captivating town near Blackthorn Lane. One evening, weary from the monotony of domestic tasks, I decided to explore this unfamiliar territory. Little did I know that I was about to stumble upon a terror that resided along the ominous road of Blackthorn Lane, a supernatural encounter that would forever haunt my existence. I left the confines of my home, got into my car, and began driving with the sole intention of finding some solace. The moon, suspended high in the midnight sky, bathed the dark landscape of Blackthorn in an ethereal glow. As an adventurous spirit, I found comfort in the solitude of that night on that road. As I navigated through the winding curves of Blackthorn Lane, an eerie silence enveloped me, punctuated by haunting whispers in the dark. The continuous murmurs of "Sarah, Sarah," echoed from both sides of the road, their source unknown. As I tried to decipher these chilling whispers, a dense fog rolled in, shrouding the road in a spectral haze. My heart pounded in my chest, and my grip on the steering wheel tightened. The atmosphere around me grew denser, stifling my breath as I strained to see through the impenetrable mist. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the trees lining the road. Mysterious and ominous shadowy figures seemed to move between the gaps in the trees. The disturbing whispers swirled through the air, their eerie melodies echoing in my ears. My rational mind dismissed these occurrences as mere figments of my imagination, but an undeniable presence lurking in the darkness continued to haunt me. As I journeyed further down Blackthorn Lane, the chanting of my name grew louder and more sinister. "Sarah! Sarah!" I felt my sanity slipping away. Then, I saw a figure standing mysteriously in the middle of the road. It flickered in and out of existence behind the fog, visible only through my headlights. Upon closer inspection, I discerned the shadowy figure of a woman, her face etched with expressions of sorrow and despair. My blood ran cold, and I was at a loss for how to react. Suddenly, the spirit reached out towards my advancing car, as if seeking comfort or perhaps a chance to communicate. Fear and curiosity mingled within my heart, compelling me to stop the car and step into the mist-shrouded night. With trepidation, I approached the mysterious figure. My voice trembled as I asked, "Who are you?" Silence filled my surroundings, as if everything was waiting for the ghostly woman to speak. But she kept her head down, her hair obscuring her face, revealing only a partially visible, creepy smirk. I bent down to look at her face, and suddenly, the ghostly woman raised her eyes. A clamor of hushed voices erupted from everywhere, echoing whispers of my name. "Sarah! Sarah! Sarah!" As this chorus of eerie and otherworldly calls surrounded me, my sanity gave way to sheer terror. The woman standing before me began laughing in a creepy tone, as if mocking my existence. My screams pierced the night as I fled towards my car in panic, desperate to escape the chilling presence that had consumed me. Throughout that night, I drove recklessly through the impenetrable depths of the thick fog, surrounded by the eerie chants of my own name, trying to find my way home and end this episode of supernatural encounter. Every 5 minutes, the ghostly woman would mysteriously appear beside the road, her creepy, loud laugh sending shivers down my spine. Disoriented and lost, I found myself trapped in a never-ending loop of terror on that treacherous road. Time lost all meaning as darkness engulfed my consciousness until the sun emerged on the horizon. It was then that I saw a stranger passing by, and I asked for help. I was on the verge of collapsing when he offered me assistance, swiftly taking the steering wheel and transporting me to the sanctuary of a hospital. This marked the end of my terrifying encounter on Blackthorn Lane, an experience that will forever be etched in my memory. It was a night like any other, filled with the usual banter and laughter that followed a trip to the movie theater. The film we had just watched had a tragic ending, and we were so engrossed in discussing it that I inadvertently steered the car onto the infamous Flatwoods Road. This was not our usual route home, and I realized my mistake too late. Of the three of us in the car, I was the only one aware of the chilling tales associated with this road, tales of a malevolent entity known as the Flatwoods Monster. I decided to keep my friends, Emily and Jake, in the dark about my error, not wanting to alarm them. However, the fear gnawed at me from within, and despite my best efforts to conceal it, my unease was palpable. Emily, ever observant, noticed the sweat on my forehead and asked me if something was wrong. I brushed off her concerns, but she was not easily fooled. After persistent questioning, I finally confessed about the road's dark history. The revelation sent a wave of terror through Emily and Jake, and they clung to their seats as we drove deeper into the dense forest. The atmosphere in the car grew increasingly tense. Emily claimed she saw shadows dancing in the glow of the headlights, forming eerie shapes on the path ahead. Jake, although visibly scared, dismissed these as mere figments of our imagination. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind shook the car, and the engine sputtered ominously. Our hearts pounded in our chests, but we resolved to stay calm and get home safely. As we stepped out of the car to inspect the engine, Emily, her face pale with fear, pointed outside the windshield. She was too terrified to speak, but her pointing finger said it all. There, in the darkness, stood a towering creature with glowing red eyes and elongated arms, the Flatwoods Monster. The sight of the creature sent chills down our spines, and we scrambled back into the car. I frantically turned the ignition key, and with a roar, the engine sprang back to life. I swerved the car, narrowly avoiding a collision with the creature. The monster pursued us relentlessly, its inhuman screeches echoing in our ears like a symphony of death. Panic consumed us as we realized we were trapped in this nightmarish chase. Just when we thought we had lost the creature, the car engine died again. Jake got out to fix the engine while Emily and I stayed inside, keeping a watchful eye on the creature. Suddenly, Emily screamed, "It's here again, Alex!" I looked back and saw the Flatwoods Monster approaching us swiftly. I tried to warn Jake, but he couldn't hear me over the noise of the engine. As the creature drew closer, I managed to start the car again. Jake, oblivious to the danger, closed the hood and turned around, only to find the creature looming over him. He froze in fear, ignoring my frantic honking. In an instant, an unseen force struck Jake and dragged him into the depths of the forest. Emily and I were left alone in the car, our hearts pounding with terror. We followed the path Jake had been dragged along, but soon lost track of him. His screams echoed through the forest for what seemed like an eternity before, fading into an eerie silence. The monster, too, vanished into the forest, leaving us alone in the car. We vowed to survive the night, and somehow found our way back to the road. We eventually made it home, but Jake was never seen or heard from again. That night continues to haunt us, and the Flatwoods Road now stands as a chilling reminder of the supernatural horrors that lurk in the shadows. For about a month, my girlfriend Sarah and I had been embroiled in a series of arguments. She felt neglected, believing that I wasn't dedicating enough time to our relationship. One Saturday night, after an overtime shift at work, I decided to make amends for our recent disagreements. "Hey Sarah, let's go," I suggested, proposing an impromptu road trip. She was taken aback but quickly packed a bag of food, and we embarked on a nocturnal drive along a random highway. We spent hours driving, engaging in lively conversations and sharing laughter. The road was desolate, with the only audible sounds being the music from the radio and the soft hum of the car engine. Halfway through our journey, Sarah began to feel fatigued and decided to take a nap. I found a rest stop and parked the car. After stretching my legs, I went inside to use the restroom. Upon my return, I found Sarah visibly shaken and trembling with fear. I held her close, trying to comfort her, and asked, "What happened, honey? You were sleeping when I left. What scared you?" She was too frightened to articulate her fear, so I reassured her that we would continue our drive and everything would be all right. As we resumed our journey, I noticed the road becoming increasingly darker. The trees grew denser around us, and the sky was overcast. The distant barks of dogs and the howls of wolves added to the eerie atmosphere. Sarah began to tremble again, expressing her fear that we were being watched from behind the trees. She was adamant about the presence of eyes lurking beyond the tree line. I tried to convince her that she was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake off my own unease. We continued driving for a few more hours, and the woods started to appear more ominous. Sarah was terrified and pleaded with me to turn back, but I was determined to see where the road would lead us. The woods became so dense that we could no longer see the sky. It was pitch black, and the only sound was the car engine humming in the deafening silence of the road. At this point, strange occurrences began to unfold. The car's headlights started to flicker, casting eerie shadows on the thick trees lining the road. A sense of unease gripped both of us, and our instincts warned us of an unseen danger. Despite Sarah's apprehension, I dismissed her fears as mere imagination. Suddenly, the car headlights went out, plunging us into complete darkness. Sarah screamed, and I slammed on the brakes. The car came to a halt, and we sat there in silence, listening to our own breathing and the occasional rustle of the trees. Intrigued by a peculiar sound echoing through the surrounding darkness, I decided to investigate and stepped out of the car, leaving Sarah alone. Paralyzed with fear, Sarah kept a watchful eye on me as I cautiously ventured into the forest, my mobile phone's torch in hand. Suddenly, my gaze locked onto a bone-chilling sight of a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a strange-looking man, tall and menacing, with creepy freckles on his face. His eyes glowed ominously red, piercing through the darkness. His presence sent shivers down my spine, and I started screaming. Hearing my screams, Sarah began to panic. She fumbled for the car keys, desperately trying to escape the encroaching nightmare. As the figure drew dangerously close, I reappeared on the road, running towards the car, my face filled with terror. I shouted at Sarah to drive, my voice trembling with fear. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah ignited the engine, the tires screeching against the road as we fled from the malevolent presence. But the horrors of that night were far from over. The road twisted and turned infinitely. I could see the strange man in the rearview mirror of the car. Along the way, we encountered several sinister entities that taunted and tormented us. Sarah was crying now, and I didn't know how to get back. Still, I kept on driving until we finally reached our home. That night serves as a stark reminder of our bond and the importance of valuing each other. But we will never forget the horrors we experienced that night.